Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show. This is your Open Championship preview. I'm your host, George Elek. I'm delighted to be joined by oddschecker's golf tipster Niall Lyons as we look ahead to this weekend at Royal Liverpool at Hoylake, of course, where Rory McIlroy's Open Championship came from. I think when he lifted the claret jug, we wouldn't have anticipated that the following decade or so would happen, but that was 2014. This is 2023, and who tops the market? It is, of course, McIlroy after his win in Scotland to the Scottish Open last weekend. Niall, you're wearing the gear. You got your Open. What do you call that? A kind of what is it? Like a quarter zip? Can we call it?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really thought about the zip.
Oh, have I? I think it's a quarter zip is what some people call it. But
yeah, never heard that before.
Picked up at Royal Rush, looking good in it. Looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's my favourite, as you know. It's my favourite of the four majors, and yeah, it should be cracking. It looks like we've got some favourable weather, some showers in between sunny spells. I don't think it'll get too windy. Maybe 15-20 mile an hour at worst to keep them honest at various times across the week. But no nightmare weather, and I don't think it'll be as bad as what it was in Scotland last weekend either. So yeah, maybe softer conditions as well. Maybe suit probably the best players in the world as well. Less volatile results, but yeah, it's great. Final major of the year. It's always a sad time, I think. You know, Wimbledon ending at the weekend, and you know the final major finishes here now too. As a kid, I always got, you know, really down about that. It spelled kind of the end of the summer as well. And as an adult, I still feel exactly the same.
Well, it's not long to wait until Friday, the 4th of August, when, of course, the championship season gets back underway with the game between Sheffield Wednesday and Southampton. So we don't have too long to wait until the real sport starts again. I also find it very difficult to. It happens too quickly. I feel like the night before the Masters, I'm like a kid before Christmas. And then suddenly it's back to being over for the year again. But we've got one last, and what a major to have as well. You mentioned the conditions, and we'll do that first. We'll talk about the conditions, we'll talk about the course, and then we'll look ahead to your selections before kind of going through some of the big players we haven't spoken about yet. And as you say, the forecast is kind of, at the moment, a bit of an odd one for an English summer. I mean, this is kind of, I feel like English summer before global warming happened, where it's the temperatures are in the mid to high teens. It's not going to be hot. There is scattered showers and scattered sunshine, so we're not really sure what it'll be like when the players are playing. It feels unlikely the course is going to be particularly linksy, because even though we're seeing dry conditions, we are seeing some rain around in the area. You know, it doesn't also look wet enough that it's going to be target golf. I don't think it's going to get, you know, really damp, and it should dry out in the morning, as these links courses often do. So is it a case of it's not going to be particularly linksy? It's not going to be like we saw last year at St Andrews with the ball rolling absolutely miles, but it's also not going to be proper links conditions where it's going to be windy and wet. So you just have to pick players on their merit rather than necessarily looking for horses for courses.
Yeah, I think it'll just play like a standard Open Championship test, a standard links test. I don't think we're looking at anything overly stressful about the weather. You know, I think you have to ignore it at this stage, really. I don't think you're looking for any real links, you know, wind specialists, so to speak. You know, I had blowed so hard when Darren Clark won, for example. I don't think we're looking at anything like that, and I think it will be softer. The course itself, there's very strategic bunkering off the tee. I think there's been a fair amount of bunkers replaced since 2014 as well. McIlroy kind of flew the lot of them when he won. I think he ranked first in driving distance that week, and Tiger Woods, obviously, when he won before that at Hoylake, only used the driver once throughout the week. So I think the same still applies. You need to manoeuvre your way throughout the course and avoid those fairway bunkers. Even we've seen last week, especially with Tyrrell Hatton, who we had backed, when he entered those fairway bunkers, which he did plenty throughout the week. You know, it's just a drop shot immediately, and the same will happen here. There's 6 out of bounds areas off the tee here as well to contend with. The third hole in particular, which will be an exciting and great watch, I think, where they have to kind of tee across the ball goes across the out of bounds. But yeah, we'll see plenty of balls out of bounds throughout the course of the week, and it's those who can control their ball flight, control their distance. I think off the tee especially will be important. If you find them fairway bunkers throughout the week, you're going to have a tough time. So those in control of their ball striking, as we often see in Open Championships, will come to the fore, I think, and be at the top of the leaderboard.
What do you make of the course itself? You know, it's a classic Open course, as I say. Rory McIlroy winning the last Open that was held there 9 years ago. What kind of a test does it provide in comparison? You know, we know that St Andrews is often a pretty low scoring event. You know, it's very gettable for these players. Unlike, you know, for example, we saw Portrush in the blizzards in 2019. What kind of test do you think this provides?
I think it'll be simple enough. Not quite as easy as St Andrews, but I think there'll be plenty of birdies on offer here, especially if you find the fairways. There's one green in particular, the 17th, the new hole, that's causing a lot of headaches for the players, I think, and the caddies alike. That'll prove to be some fun over the weekend, I think. Trying to keep the ball on that green, trying to find the right areas to get close to the pin, but. In general, I think it favours the Bombers. The back nine is the longest back nine in Open Championship history. I think that'll prove to be quite important across the week. I can't see many golfers who don't hit the ball very far towards the top of the leaderboard here, despite ball striking often being key and so, you know, accuracy off the tee. You know, you will need to avoid the fairway bunkers, but at the end of the day, McIlroy flew them back in 2014, and I think the winner here will play a kind of similar game and hit the ball very long and far and straight to score well.
It's interesting because you look through the scores in 2014. McIlroy went on -17, which again kind of echoes what you were saying about it being a fairly simple test for Open Championship golf. But if you look through the top 10 there, I mean, this was a different era, I guess. So therefore, there were fewer bombers. But, you know, you've got Rickie Fowler and Sergio 2 shots behind McIlroy, Furyk in fourth. The Australian duo, Leishman and Scott, we know that Aussies have a very good record in this competition, culminating in Smithsville last year and tied fifth. Eduardo Molinari and Charles Schwartzel in tied seventh. Then Debrisson, Lowry and McDowell, they're in tied ninth. So you've got,
in my mind, that
leaderboard,
mix, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they're at the likes of Debrisson, certainly McDowell, Lowry, Schwartzel. I mean, these are players where short game was their kind of their forte, especially at that time in their career, looking at Lowry.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, McIlroy still won it, and he won it in the game, which, you know, a right handful in the game turn up with now. A very similar game to that, especially the two alongside him in the market, the second and third favourites. So yeah, I just think the same will play out. I think the winner will not be the Jim Furyks of 2014, but it'll be the Rory McIlroys.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's have a look at the players that you've put for selection. I should say, I've been lucky enough to play Royal Liverpool a couple of years ago, and it's a very, very different links course to kind of other open tracks that I've managed to play. You know, where you think of the likes of Royal St George's, of Birkdale, where it kind of feels like you're heading out into the expanse with only the golf course and the sea to divide you. With Hoylake, it's a little bit different, where you kind of come off a fairly main road. There's a beautiful clubhouse. I mean, it's still an amazing track, but it kind of feels more like a kind of links parkland course, if you can kind of understand that. Like, it's a bit more enclosed. You don't really feel the presence of the sea apart from like right in one far corner. And I was lucky enough to play that new 17th, which I think is actually the 15th in kind of regulation in the members course, because they switch around the last 4 holes. And it is mega. Like, I've never really played a hole like it. It's a very weird shot to have to play. It's very short and it's straight up a hill. And if you miss club by an inch or you miss it by kind of 15 yards to either side of the pin, then you've got to come back up the valley again. So I kind of always feel, and we saw it in the PGA Championship, sorry, in the US Open, I always feel like these tricky par threes that everyone gets very excited about, normally the pros get there and they actually make kind of light work of it, and that might be the case here. But certainly as an amateur standing that tee, I don't really know what to do. But it's a cracking track, and as you say, I think the par fives especially are very, very scoreable. And for those who can hit the ball a fair way off the tee, that the likes of McIlroy shouldn't really have too much issue getting up into and having plenty of eagle chances, let alone birdies.
What did you shoot? What did you shoot?
I can't remember. I know that I got I know I made a birdie on what will be the 18, which I think is 16, the way that we play it. I hit the ball OB off the first tee, which was, whenever you go and play a course like that and you do that off the first tee, it's always hard to kind of bounce back particularly quickly. But I also bought my driving iron in the pro shop, and it's still doing me well, so that's all right. Well, I'm playing terribly at the moment. Jesus. Anyway, let's. I digress. No one cares. Let's get into your selections finally, and it's an interesting one because I always read your preview columns, and I always kind of think I have an idea of where you're going to go and who you're going to put up. We chat about golf a fair bit together as well, but I was surprised to see the way that you went about this. It doesn't feel like your standard Niall Lyons strategy in kind of countdown terms. It's 2 from the top and 3 from the bottom, please, Carol. And the outright, well, you've got 2 4-point each way selections, which kind of tells you where we're going to go first. And it's 2 of the top 3 in the market, Scotty Scheffler and John Rahm. Firstly, I guess, tell us why this is the way you've gone about it this weekend.
Yeah, well, I've almost been forced into it. I just cannot believe how short a handful of the golfers are, between 16 and 25 to 1. Cameron Smith, for one, we'll go into it later. I have a few negatives about him. Tommy Fleetwood has had numerous chances now in the PGA Tour in the last couple of months. And even though, I'm not one to point the finger and heavily criticise for this, because at the end of the day, he's still playing great golf and in tough fields as well. But he's failed down the back 9 to manage a victory, and I'm just surprised how short he's got. I think he had 10 or 11 or 12 pars to start with in Scotland there on Sunday as well, and kind of looked to be, Francesco Molinari in his way to victory at the Renaissance, and then just over the final 5 or 6 holes was just very disappointing once again. So I think he's quite easily passed over. Tyrrell Hatton, he's around a 25, 28 to 1 mark. Again, just slightly short for me. I liked them last week, but there's a few players added to this field now as well, and
it's got to be a concern as well how Hatton played in contention. Like he seemed to hit the front and get kind of idle out in front and then drop back into the back again.
Yeah, it was a shame, and I think he missed a 3-footer for par around the 12th or 13th, and I think that really scuppered his chances. But he had numerous times over the week where he frittered shots away that he didn't really need to, especially on the Saturday.
3 putts from 17 and 18 on Saturday, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was tough to take. So again, I think he's quite short. I think Rickie Fowler's playing some great golf, but I think the kind of links and open narrative around him is almost overplayed. I don't think he should be this short for a major championship at this stage. He has been playing great all year, but nevertheless, again, I'm surprised at how short he is. So it draws me into the favourites, and McIlroy, if he putts well, he's going to be hard to beat, but equally the same could be applied to Scotty Scheffler. And I think his ball striking over the last number of months, which everybody knows about now, is just going to translate to another victory sooner or later. His putting is the problem. It was a problem again in Scotland at the weekend. 63rd on the greens out of the 77 that made the cut. But that was still good enough for 3rd place. That's how good his ball striking is, that it just eclipses everyone else at the minute. And I think that's going to be the key to unlocking Hoylake this week. It's going to be the long game. And there's nobody better equipped in the game than Scheffler. I think there's quite volatile holes on the course as well. There's really tough holes and then a lot easier holes, and it kind of reminded me of Sawgrass, the way it's lets up at times as well, and he's got a win there earlier on this season too. So everything points towards him. I think he'll be hard to beat, and if he manages to hold putts, I think he could win it easily.
Yeah, interesting to note as well, Scotty's record in the Open Championship so far was a tied 8 in 2021, which, for a rookie, an American coming over to play Open Championship golf for the first time is some effort, and then tied 21st at St Andrews, which again, it's going to be a very, very different test in terms of conditions, I think, this weekend, but still a pretty good effort. When you consider his major record this year so far, tied 10th in the Masters, where famously he led tee to green in strokes gained and was last in the field for putting, tied second in the PGA Championship, third in the US Open, hasn't finished worse than tied 12th in an event since October.
It's incredible,
in
isn't
my
it?
mind. There aren't many better. I backed him each way in the PGA Championship and the US Open, and you didn't even sweat the place for a second, really. It's frustrating watching him miss a few putts, but the fact that you're turning over profit for a guy who is so relentlessly there.
Yeah.
All he has to do is finish. You put him up 8-1, 8 places.
There's been a sustained move on him all day as well. There was 9s about this morning, and now you're looking at max 8s and 15-2 and 7s and going even shorter. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes off exchange favourite at this.
Rate. I agree. Yeah, 8-1 best price you're getting at the moment. You're getting that with a few firms. The best place terms you're going to get are 888, who are 8 places, unsurprisingly. Boyles, who are 8 places and 8-1, and Fred, who are the same as well. So there's a few places you can still back in, but it does feel like that is going. Even as I speak, 888 just cut to 15-2. So Betfred, 8-1, 58, and second up, who you put up at 14-1, I think it wasn't it? 4 points each way again. That is no longer the best you're going to get now for 8 places. Is 12-1 about Jon Rahm, Masters champion. 8 places. Bet365, Sky Bet, a couple of others. He was scintillating at Augusta, unbelievably dominant right at the beginning of the season as well. But I guess out of the 3, there's no denying that he comes into this not quite with the scintillating form of the top 2. What makes you fancy his chances here?
Well, he was quite unpopular when he went into the Masters, despite having won 3 times this season before that. He was 39th in the Arnold Palmer, withdrew, of course, after a round at Sawgrass, and then went out early in the match play. So arrived quite unpopular to Augusta, and obviously we know what happened then. And ever since, he's been in better form leading into this tournament than what he was at the Masters. He managed to runner-up in Mexico, 16th at the Memorial, Muirfield Village. His ball striking was incredible that week again. Just struggled with the putter. He was ranked one of the last players in the field, the last 5 or 6 golfers in the field, those who made the cut in the green. So that result would have been a lot better. 10th at the US Open, another fine effort. Missed the cut last time out at the Travellers, but he's failed to make the top 20 there in 4 attempts. So I wouldn't read too much into that event. It's not really an event that would suit him either. It's kind of a birdie fest. So I think his form coming in is absolutely fine. And as I say, I think it's better than what it was coming into the Masters. He skipped Scotland, which I don't know is a good thing or not. I don't think it's necessary to play the Scottish Open. He chose instead to go to Ireland, and he played Ballybunion, which would be a great preparation for this, in my opinion. And the conditions were that tough over in Scotland at the weekend that quite possibly it upsets the equilibrium of a couple of golfers. Seeing this week, you won't have the same conditions to deal with, it looks like. But yeah, I'm surprised he's out there around 16.5 on the exchange now, and I'm surprised at that. And if you look at the bookmakers' prices, 12-1 Rahm versus the likes of 22-1 about Fowler and Fleetwood and the likes. Give me Rahm any day at 12-1. Someone who's won two majors in his last 9 attempts. I think he's just another one who has to be backed. And just the way this market has developed over the last week or 2, it's just rendered the top 3 in the market, in my opinion, very backable.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, would you talk there about the top 3 in the market? Obviously, it's Scheffler and Rahm, your 2 selections. Did you find it easy to leave Rory? I mean, obviously you weren't going to put all 3 up, but did you find Rory the easy to leave him out of the staking plan?
There's plenty of scar tissue with me and McIlroy. You know, I've landed him a right few times as well. But
Niall, I think that's you and the whole nation. So
yeah.
I don't think you're alone there.
So I don't know. I just think Scheffler was arguably. There's an argument there that he should be favoured, and it's probably going that way. And I don't quite make Rahm close to double the price that McIlroy is either. So I think it just favour those two. There's no reason not to be backing McIlroy. I have no negatives to suggest whatsoever. So yeah, I just think the price of the other two dictated where I went, but it was always going to be in the top three.
Yeah, given that you have to think in the last 12 months, if Rory McIlroy had parted even 6 out of 10 on 2 Sundays, he would have probably taken 2 majors. And it's only going to be a matter of time, surely, before those parts start to drop on a Sunday, like I guess they did at Renaissance, where it was an unbelievable clutch bit of play from an 18, brilliant shot, and then holding an all-important part. And I do think for McIlroy, seeing that ball drop on 18 in Scotland is going to be huge if he does get into contention on Sunday. 3 triple figure selections make up the staking plan here. All of them are 1 point. Both 2 1 point each way. The final one 0.75 points each way. Keegan Bradley, the first selection here, you put him up at 110 to 1. That price is still around 8 places. The best you're going to get, that's with 365. What makes you fancy Keegan here?
I think it's 16 out of the last 22 Open winners this century have won earlier on that season, either on the DP World Tour or the PGA Tour. So I think concentrating on some winners at big prices could pay. And Bradley's one of them. Bradley's won twice on the PGA Tour now in his last 21 starts, and yet arrives here at triple figures. Mainly probably because people don't see the Open as a requisite test for him. It's not somewhere where he's going to thrive, but nevertheless, he's got 3 top 20s and 9 appearances in the Open Championship. One of them being at Royal Liverpool here in 2014. His ball striking has been in tremendous form all season as well, but he brings a short game as well. He's putting extremely well all year. He was unlucky kind of not to win at the Farmers as well, just pipped there. Second earlier on in the year as well. So he's had a great year, a great season. The Zozo that he won back in October last year was part of this season, of course. So 2 wins this season, a runner-up at Torrey Pines as well. Everything's going swimmingly for him, and I think he's just been too easily dismissed by the bookmakers and punters alike. And if someone goes and wins, Bradley goes and wins this at the weekend, you'll be kicking yourself that you weren't on at 100 to 1. Someone who's won twice in the PGA Tour in his last 20 tries.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I'm trying to find the stats as you speak, but I can't find them. But I know that Keegan is up there in terms of his round 1 performance compared to the rest of the weekend. So if you do fancy Bradley, it could be worth having a look in the first round leader market, obviously depending on draw as well. In terms of his Open record itself, as you mentioned, obviously in cracking form at the moment, and we've seen him go pretty well. He's got 3 top 20 finishes previously in the Open Championship. So 3 top 20 finishes. So even though he's missed the cut a couple of times recently, we know that when he's playing well, he can certainly produce that kind of form on the links over this side and of the Atlantic.
Plenty usually come in with winning form as well, and he only won 2 starts ago. Molinari had won 2 starts previous when he won. Spieth won his last start before the Open. So just looking at the last couple of events can often prove fruitful, and I think just PGA Tour winners at triple prices here are worth eyeing. 2 more.
Corey Connors, another one who's won on tour this season. Elite ball striker. How do you, what do you? I know he was very popular in certain events a couple of weeks ago. How do you feel his game is coming into this?
Yeah, I think it's perfect for an Open Championship. He's done well in 2 Open Championships here to date. His two jaunts here have been top 30 finishes, 28th and 15th. He ranked 4th in strokes gained approach at the Travellers, and then ranked 8th in strokes gained off the tee last week in Scotland. definitely has the ability, I think, to win a major, and he's gone well in majors before. 3 top 10s at the Masters, and obviously he had good experience earlier on in the PGA, earlier on this year in May, where he was in the final couple of groups over the weekend, and I think that's really valuable. It's something I always point to when looking at potential major champions. He won, of course, in the PGA Tour a couple of months ago, winning in Texas, and that's his second Texas Open victory. Of course, an event which is notorious with wins. Good ball strikers do well in. And if any wins do materialise or any bad weather here over the next 4 days, I think Connors is more than equipped to cope with it. I'm quite excited about his chances. Another PGA Tour winner, triple figure prices. I'm surprised he's gone that big. I think we've looked at him, in majors earlier on in the season, and you haven't got much bigger than 50 to 1. And now he's won. And yeah, he has all the tools to contend here once again. And just like Tom Kim last week, kind of, another great ball striker who's just beginning to find some form. Tom Kim's now half the price of Corey Connors, and it just doesn't sit right with me. And I'm surprised that the Canadians up triple figures here.
Yeah, for sure. Massive price. So many of these players who just seem to have a couple of weeks without sparkling form when they drift to a huge price. Corey Connors, one of those. And finally, I thought if there was going to be someone on the staking plan, his initials were JS, it would be your boy Jordan Spieth, but it's not. It's Jordan, but it's Jordan Smith, who's had a really impressive, I think he's been one of the kind of quiet standout players this season, both on the DP World Tour and over in the PGA Tour as well, when he has come over to the States. Jordan Smith is best price on the oddschecker grids, 300 to 1, but you've taken the extra places and taken the 250 to 1, 8 places best there at the moment. That's with Skybet.
Yeah, I think this is a really valuable play. It's just that it went so heavy in the staking towards the top that this is maybe worthy of a bit more than a 0.75 point each way at 250s. He won in Portugal last October. That's an event that's always synonymous with good win players. His ball striking efforts, there's been some really eye-catching efforts this season. Third in strokes gained approach at the US Open. He shot a 4 under par round there on the final day, which was only beaten by 3 others. So a top 20 finish there in the US Open, goes with a 9th place finish at the PGA back in 2017. So he's only played in 7 majors, and he's got a top 10 and he's got a top 20. Again, he ranks 18th on approach last week in Scotland. That's 18th on approach on a PGA Tour field, a really strong one last week in Scotland. At the US Open, he was 3rd strokes gained approach. These are unbelievable efforts with the irons. The problem lies on the greens, and he's having real struggles with the putter. But nevertheless, this is one definitely worth chancing. He was 12th in Scotland last week. And you look at the likes of Bob McIntyre, who's now about a 50 to 1 shot after finishing runner-up there. A couple of weeks ago on the European Tour, these guys were at the same prices. Jordan Smith actually a couple of times shorter than Bob McIntyre. Now he turns up at 250 to 1, having done nothing wrong in my eyes. 12th, obviously, as I say, last week in Scotland. Previous to that, I did back him in Denmark as well. Put him up in the column. He finished 35th. Again, putting poorly, but his putting's got better. 3 weeks on the trot now. 2 weeks on the trot in Denmark and in Scotland. And if he can get into positive numbers, strokes gained on the week, and continues his excellent play with the irons, the 250 to 1's a silly price. Maybe one to look to as well in the extra markets, top English, etc., being so heavily dominated by the likes of Fleetwood and Hatton, who I think are too short in the market. And clearly Jordan Smith is too big as well, given what he's done. So yeah, maybe one to play in the side markets too.
Yeah, interesting. That makes up the staking plans. Scheffler 4 points each way, 8 to 1. Rahm 4 points each way at 14 to 1. A point each way Bradley 110. A point each way Connors 100 to 1. Smith 0.75 points each way at 250 to 1. I must admit, tempted to fall into we're going to talk about a couple of players now, and even though I wasn't going to mention him because you have the McIntyre trap, where I've never been that interested in backing him before. And I know there's been a debate that's raged with a mutual friend of ours, Ben Coley, on Twitter in recent years about, is the reputation worthy of the golfer? But there's no denying that his Open Championship record is tremendous. He's tied 6th in Portrush on debut, tied 8th in 2021, and finished a respectable 34th last year. So 3 made cuts, 2 top 10s. and he comes into this having, come very close to winning in Scotland, an unbelievable run on Sunday. His shot into 18 was deserving of winning any tournament with just an unbelievable shot in close on 18 from basically nowhere. And then, as you say, went very well in Denmark with the top 5 before that. There's, he's got to be someone who, you mentioned 50 to 1. He's 80 to 1 with Unibet right now, who is going to be popular with punters. But I understand the comparison with Smith, but is he not someone that you think could challenge this weekend?
Yeah, totally. And I wasn't one who bought into that.
Narrative.
Kind of popular narrative at the time that he wasn't as good as what the hype was. I was and still am quite excited about McIntyre. His long games, exceptional when it's on. He's just a shade inconsistent. And obviously he's had troubles with a putter every now and again too. People say he's one of the best putters about as well. But he had a great putting week last week in Scotland, but he's had his troubles all year with the putter, to be fair. But it turned around last week, obviously. But again, I just think he's gone a bit short in the market. He's got a great open record, but I think you're looking at that. You're looking at a place here. I just can't see McIntyre going to win it. I think maybe his performance last week would seduce people into backing him. At shorter odds, and it just doesn't quite sit with me. I'd far rather back, Corey Connors at 100 to 1.
Yeah,
he's won on the PGA Tour this season than Bob McIntyre, who still hasn't won this year.
I think there's an interesting thing as well with McIntyre, where if his performance remained exactly the same and Rory had hit it miles left on 18 and made a 5, and McIntyre wins, walks off the range, with the trophy not having had a playoff, then I can guarantee you there'll be no 80 to 1 around, which is ridiculous, because as soon as that win goes in, you see that the price being cut across the board. Just in case there's anyone else who I'm pretty sure there isn't, but Niall, we've been doing this for about 5 years, and I always say who I backed, and normally we leave it to the end, but I backed McIntyre, so I might as well say it now. I also I fancy Bryson again, who I've seen him. He's been put up by Jamie Worsley, who's a tipster worth reading. Always his stuff is very good. But I just think there's a narrative around him which is just completely wrong now, where he's still perceived as being this wild, big hitting. This is past 67 for me player, whereas actually he's just playing just relentlessly solid golf. And you only have to look back to Valderrama, where I'm not comparing the test as being similar, but Valderrama is a course where position off the tee and your wedge game is of paramount importance. And it was only an incredible third round effort from Taylor Gooch that stopped Shambo winning that, and the two of them pulled well clear of the pack. And he's trading like near the 100 to 1 mark on the exchange. He finished 8th at St Andrews last year. With these markets, I always think you've got to look for areas where maybe narrative or just the perception of players isn't exactly correct. Similar to Brits Koepka, I guess, before Augusta, and Bryson seems like that to me coming into this week.
Yeah, I don't disagree with her at all. And his effort that he produced there at Valderrama, if he produces something similar, the strokes gain stats on the field, that there, you put that on a PGA Tour where it wins almost every single week. So I don't disagree with you at all. He comes here off his best open finish, as you say, last year, tied 8th at St Andrews. The one thing there is that St Andrews would suit him a lot more. There's a lot more room off the tee, and there's a lot more drivable par 4s and things like that. And you've got to plot your way around here a bit more. But as you say, you got to plot your way around Valderrama, and he's playing great stuff. Like, he's got a couple of top 5s in his last 3 or 4 live events, and of course finished 4th in the PGA. So there's plenty going for him, and as you say, he's just not someone you would automatically think of who would contend an Open Championship, but thinking outside of the box like that can often prove fruitful, and you get some returns for sure.
Yeah, tied 4th in the US PGA Championship and tied 20th at the US Open, so some decent major form as well. Let's go back up to the top of the market, and nice. I'll blow my own trumpet of saying that. Someone I did back last year, Cameron Smith, who won at St Andrews. He's currently 18 to 1 best price. That is with BetVictor, kind of 14 to 1 market price, 16 to 1 a bit of as well. He's going to be very, very popular with punters again. Any idea? I think that live players aren't a half cooked, I think is done with now. It's not reflected in the market. I don't think it's really reflected in the way anyone's thinking. I think Brooks Koepka and just general, if you look at the leaderboard for the Masters, it was pretty chocker with the live players. But Smith, it was a different test at St Andrews, as we've already said. And as ever with him, it's all going to come down to a short game if he can contend.
Yeah, he's a negative for me, if anything. I think he's crazy short as well. My opinion of the live guys is that until someone other than Brooks wins a major, I'll remain slightly skeptical about, how they're going to get over the line. I think I've talked about it loads of times when we preview majors that a recent effort, like in a big tournament, in a cauldron type atmosphere, is a huge advantage. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Brooks went and won his major after having had one of those in the bank at the Masters. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he failed the first time, but second time around, after a month after having been in the final group at the Masters, that he got the job done. But whilst others come here and haven't played stress-free golf, so to speak, on the Live Tour, it just doesn't appeal to me an awful lot, and especially around that price, around 14, 16 to 1. I've been reliably informed by his data guy, Duncan Carey, who's had unbelievable success with golfers lately. Norman, the latest of them on the PGA Tour at the weekend, that he ranked last in the field in greens and regulation that week, that he won on the Live Tour, which is just absolutely incredible. As said, his long game was all over the place, and he was saved by his short game, and that's a huge negative for me. You could say that if he sorts his long game out, then he could easily go and win this, given the state of his short game. But that's a bit alarming to me to hear that. And if anything, I would potentially look to him for to be one of the favourites who could miss the cut. If you can get anything bigger than around 4 to 1 out there, that could be a bet on a side market. But yeah, again, at 14, 16 to 1 just is of little interest to me.
You mentioned there players who have come out of the cauldron of competing, and even though he hasn't gone to Live, you have to think there's similarities, I guess, with what's happened with Rickie Fowler over the last 12 months or so, where his game, you go back to last year's US Open, where he was waiting on the range to see if he was going to get in as first reserve, and then he goes in 12 months later as the leader into Sunday, and was in the thick of that cauldron, played with the eventual winner, as tipped up by herself and Wyndham Clark, and surely would have learned a lot from that. And then, of course, followed it up with his first PGA Tour victory since 2019, just a couple of weeks ago. I always think this is true as well. It's a bit like in the playoffs, where if you have a beaten finalist and they get back to Wembley, normally you see them put that right. And it does feel like when a player has just missed out on a Sunday in majors and they're there contending again, there does seem to be that steal there. Fowler's clearly playing some of the best golf in the world right now. 25 to 1 he is, again, sure to be popular. Any temptation for me to back him?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to back him, to be honest, George, but once again, and as I said earlier, the price just isn't big enough. But you weigh up your two options of backing Tommy Fleetwood at maybe a point or two less than what Fowler is. Fowler is a much better option at the price, given he just won on the PGA Tour a couple of weeks ago as well. So he's a much more accomplished golfer, I think, than Fleetwood as well. I think Fleetwood's had many chances, even over the last couple of months, to land that PGA Tour victory, and it hasn't materialised. And I'm quite disappointed in how he's closed out those back nines. Fowler has every chance of going and winning this Open Championship. He really, really does. There's absolutely no negatives about him. But the big negative for me is the price, and I just can't. I can't get involved at that. Give me Rahm at half his price any day. Yeah,
no doubt. And then two players who you talk often about, players who contended in majors. Brooks Koepka and Victor Hovland both competed in the Masters and the USPGA Championship, and looking at Hovland in particular, he was playing with McIlroy in the final group. last year at St Andrews as well, so has tasted that Open Championship competition too. Two guys who kind of are wedged in between the top four in the market and the rest of the pack. Thoughts on their chances? Brooks, is someone who's always going to be there now. He's won another one, but his Open record isn't great.
Yeah, I quite like, Tommy Fleetwood, Victor Hovland. I'm obsessed with Tommy Fleetwood here this week. Hovland, has done everything right in terms of those stepping stones towards winning a major. And I was quite disappointed to miss out on his victory a couple of months ago. I've backed him a few times this year. We were on at the Masters as well, where he was quite disappointed and then deserted him. Deserted him in the PGA, and he nearly made us pay, and then got back on in the US Open. Just didn't quite happen. But winning the Memorial, huge feather in his cap. And the tie 25th last week in Scotland was just a quiet enough appearance going under the radar that it's just a perfect preparation, I think. But again, 16, 18 to 1 out there. God, you can just win at those prices, can't they? Like don't have any other explanation. I'm just so, and they can win all they like, Give me 8 and 9
that's fine.
About Scheffler.
I'm going to give you three players then to close off the show that I think you might have more trouble leaving, who are just a bit bigger prices. Who maybe fit more in terms of what you're looking to do. Jordan Spieth is 35 to 1. That's best price with Unibet for 7 places. 2019 champion Shane Lowry, fresh off a very good week in Scotland, is 33 to 1. Best price that is with Bet Victor. And Dustin Johnson is a sea of blue after many people have tipped him, including Ben Coley. He's 35 to 1, best price with Unibet. I don't think you're going to tell me that you found those three easy to leave at the prices.
Yeah, Dustin Johnson especially. I think he's playing sneakily good golf, really. And I included him last year when it wasn't quite popular to include the live golfers. I backed him in the Open last year, and he went well. Again at St Andrews, finishing 6th. He obviously spurned a chance the last time at St Andrews he played there too. But top 10 in his last 3 events, last 2, played well at Valderrama again. Iron play was quite good that week too. Top 10 at the US Open. It's always one of the things that I look to, that I always harp on about. People are sick of hearing it. But a previous good effort in the last major, and 10th there is absolutely fine. And it could have been a lot better too. His ball striking, tee to green, he was unbelievable that week and just didn't hold any putts. So, Dustin Johnson certainly. I think when I look to live golfers, especially now, until another one other than Brooks wins it, as I explained there, I've got a few negatives about them. But whenever the likes of Dustin Johnson or Brooks Koepka, I think Dustin Johnson's in the same mold as Koepka, that he could easily do it. I think some live golfers would find it quite tough to get over the line, having not played in a big pressure situation of late. But Dustin Johnson's one of those guys where he's just that cool, and he's got that character about him that he can just go and win a major championship like that. So it's no surprise that he's proved popular, especially given how who's the better golfers here, Dustin Johnson or Tommy Fleetwood, and even Rickie Fowler and all. There's a serious conversation to be had that Dustin Johnson's still a fair bit better than those guys. I just think the links thing almost as overplayed, and what happened last week in Scotland, people are getting sidetracked by that, and they're proving very popular. The guys who finished in the top 10 last week and fought it out, but they've all shortened, whilst plenty of others have drifted, and Dustin Johnson's one of them. So he must have every chance.
DJ, that is anything on Spieth and Shane?
Shane doesn't really interest me. I think he's far too short again. Simply a price. I haven't got many negatives against him. Spieth's obviously had his injury problems over the last couple of months, and he hasn't drifted enough to a backable enough mark for me again. Going into the Masters, I think he was a much more attractive price than what I know he's shorter now, but he was playing much better golf then. I think he was a more attractive option then. And lately he's just had enough troubles to, make me think that there's just better options out there. If Spieth comes back to bite me on the butt, I will be devastated.
There we go. We'll leave you with images of Niall's butt as we close the Open Championship preview in 2023. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch or listen to this. Make sure you subscribe to the Oddschecker YouTube channel so you can find plenty more Oddschecker betting shows as we go through the summer. Thank you very much to Niall for sharing his tips and insight as ever. You can find his columns up on the Oddschecker site or on the app, which you should download now for the best prices, bookie offers, free bets, and plenty of tipsters, including Niall himself, and the place terms, which are all important for golf punting too. Enjoy the golf. It should be a cracker. I'm looking out for Niall's specials column, which will hopefully be out in the next couple of days. But yeah, enjoy it. Hopefully we flagged up a couple of winners there. I'd love to go through every player with Niall, but sadly we don't have enough time, certainly not the Open anyway. But enjoy the golf, and please do ensure that you gamble responsibly.